Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm joined this evening by Daragh Quinn from Château de Fieuzal. Before we start, we are going to talk about the housekeeping rules. So first thing to say is that we are recording the tasting, but only Daragh and myself are being recorded. So please feel free to leave your cameras on. We won't be recording you. You can click speaker view to get the best view of the tasting. And if you have any questions, you're very welcome to put them in the feed and we will try to answer those questions as we go through. If you see your question disappearing, don't worry, we will come back to them and we'll try to answer them as we go through the course of the evening. Remember to eat and drink throughout the course of the tasting. And without further ado, I think we are ready to start. So Daragh, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us in the first of our Irish Wine Geese series. And we were just chatting before, just before we went live there, about the fact that we believe that it's only your own family and the family at L'Abeilles who are the only two Irish families that are still, if you like, whilst there's huge history among Irish families going to Bordeaux and working in the wine industry and owning Château. At the moment, there's two Irish families current day owning the Château. Is that right?
Yeah, well, first of all, good evening, and thank you very much for the invitation opportunity to present some Fieuzal wines. And yeah, I mean, our Irish families have a long history in Bordeaux, going back over the last 300 years, and you know, some of those chateaux kept their Irish names, but you know, passed on to other families. The Barton family would be an exception, so it's still in the same family. I think it was originally bought maybe in 1740. So it's actually the chateau in Bordeaux that's been owned the longest by any single family.
That's Leopold Barton, yes.
Correct, yeah.
And it was Thomas Barton that went over originally, was it? From that family in Ireland?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I guess, you know, my parents are kind of the modern version
Modern
of
Irish
that.
wine geese.
Yeah.
So when did your parents buy Château de Fieuzal?
2001.
2001.
Yeah.
And what was the motivation? What was the desire to own a Bordeaux chateau? I mean, I think I can imagine, but why don't you tell us? Why don't you share it with us?
Yeah, my parents and my dad in particular is, you know, is very passionate about wine. He has been interested in wine, not just Bordeaux, but you know, all the regions in France and elsewhere. So he's always had a passion for wine, and they made the decision to look at an opportunity of purchasing a chateau that you know could make or makes great wine, and Fieuzal was an opportunity that presented itself, and that was the marriage of you know the interest in wine, and then this particular chateau having you know a great terroir potential, and those two factors coming together.
And tell me, was he specifically looking at Bordeaux, or he had an open mind, or was he keen on Bordeaux?
You know, definitely very keen on Bordeaux.
Okay.
And I think as well, Bordeaux is, you know, is today, and you know, going back to when the Bartons bought it in 1740, has always been very international, and always very open to the wider wine world. So you know, Bordeaux wine was being, you know, exported. You know, it's been a global business for centuries. So the ability to come in from the outside or have exposure to it or be able to integrate into the region is easier maybe than smaller, maybe more insular winemaking regions in other parts of France or Europe.
Okay. And Pessac, was Pessac an area that he was keen to look at, or the opportunity came up in Pessac?
Yeah, he kind of jokes sometimes as, you know, why did you buy Fieuzal? And the answer is, well, it was for sale.
Yeah.
But so what, not necessarily specifically looking for a chateau in Pessac-Léognan, but you know, it is an historic wine growing area of Bordeaux. There's great history. There's great vineyards in the region, and yeah, Fieuzal was up for sale at the time. So
okay. And so that's the red barrel room that's behind you. Maybe you could just talk a bit about what the property, and maybe we should pour some white while we're talking.
Yes,
Actually.
absolutely.
That might be a good idea. So the first wine, obviously, is the L'Abeilles de Fieuzal, and it's the 2019 vintage. So we'll have a glass of this while we're chatting.
So yeah, so just to kind of, give everyone a little idea of, where Fieuzal is and kind of what the estate entails. So Pessac-Léognan is the northern part of the Grave region, and there are two villages essentially, and Fieuzal is just outside the village of Léognan. It's 76 hectares, almost 11 hectares of white, and the remainder of red. And obviously this part of Bordeaux, the Grave region, is famous for not just its reds, but also its whites. And Fieuzal in particular is, I would say, famous for its whites, particularly starting from the 1980s. And the room that you can see behind me is the part of the red barrel room, which is a underground barrel room, which we built in 2011. So my parents purchased the estate in 2001, and we did a big renovation in 2011 where we rebuilt all the winemaking facilities and cellars, and that's what you can see behind me.
And was the property in a poor state of repair when your parents bought it, or?
No, it had been purchased by a French bank during the 90s, and they'd made some acquisitions of land, but I think they decided that they wouldn't be able to, or didn't want to continue with the ongoing investments that a chateau requires. I think when the winemaking facilities had been built in the 80s, and by the time we got to 2010, it was time for an update. So like any business, you have to keep on investing in it if you want to maintain the quality of the wine you're making. So the two biggest investments that we've made are rebuilding the cellars, which we did in 2011. And then the other is maintaining and planting of the actual vines, and that's a huge ongoing investment. Obviously, that's where we get the quality of the wine is will be a reflection of the quality of the vines and the parcels that we're maintaining.
So was the vineyard the first, as you said earlier on, at the end of the day, it is a farm. It's a farm for grapes, but it is a farm, a very nice farm.
Mm-hmm.
So was the first efforts put into the vineyards, was it, when you first bought the property, or when your parents first bought the property?
Yeah, so my parents hired a young winemaker, well, he was young at the time, Stéphane Carrier, in 2007.
Okay.
And when Stéphane joined, we came up with what was the investment that Fieuzal needed to, reach the potential that the land or the terroir has. And that was basically one is to rebuild the cellars. And then the second was, okay, we need to do some replanting.
Mm-hmm.
So the 65 hectares of red that we have planted today, I would say over the last kind of 14 years, we've replanted more than 32 hectares. Okay. And that's obviously not something that you can do in 1 year.
No.
It takes time. And then when you've done the replanting, it takes time for those vines to settle in and, start. It takes a few years before they can start kind of really producing quality wine. So that's a long investment. We've kind of done that now. So the wines we're drinking tonight, are a reflection of the investment we've made in the winemaking side, and also out in the vineyard.
Mm-hmm. And did you change the proportion of grapes, in the sense of, did you stick with the did you stick with what was there, or did you change the percentages of plantings?
Yeah, we changed, in some parcels, we've replanted with different grape varieties. For the red, obviously the main grape varieties are Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. And then we also had some Cabernet Franc and Petit Verdot. But over the years, we've actually removed the Cabernet Franc. So we just have now Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, pretty much in equal proportions. And then Petit Verdot. We just have those three. So some parcels were replanted with the same variety, some we changed. It was very much done on a kind of parcel by parcel approach.
Okay. So let's talk about the white then, first of all. And I should say that we will send out a link to the tasting tomorrow afternoon, so people can go on and watch the tasting again, or they can watch it if they're not been able to join this evening. But for the people only and we'll also send out a feedback form, but the people who are with us this evening, there is a nice prize bottle of the L'Abeilles de Fieuzal White 2019 for the best question that we have while we're tasting the white wine. So if you have any burning questions to ask Daragh about winemaking, about the estate, there is a nice bottle that can wing its way to you. So please have a think and see if there's anything that you want to know, because there's a nice bottle available. So let's chat about the white then. Talk to us about Pessac white wines. In my view, just some of the most amazing wines in the world, white wines from Pessac.
Yeah, so the Grav region, the name kind of gives an indication of the type of soil that a lot of the vineyards have. So it's very stony, gravelly, and there's a lot of drainage, which really helps keep the wine very fresh, and enables for us to have these white wines that have a good acidity, good fruit, and in our case, in particular, I think in the case of Fieuzal, longevity. So like the red, it's a blend of grapes. So almost all Bordeaux wines are a blend. And for the white, we're blending Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon, and they're the two grapes for the white.
And in the 19 vintage, what were the proportions of each?
So we're 55% Sauvignon Blanc, 45% Semillon. So for L'Abeilles, typically it's a even split a balance between Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon.
Okay. And tell me, what would you feel that the Sauvignon brings to the blend, and what does the Semillon bring to the blend?
Yeah, so the Sauvignon Blanc has great acidity, and that kind of provides the backbone of the wine. And then the Semillon kind of brings a kind of a richness or a bit more depth and flavor on the palate. And they complement each other very well. A lot of particularly when the wines are younger, a lot of the aromas, are very much driven by the Sauvignon Blanc. So you get those kind of peach, apricot, stone fruit kind of aromas, and then on the palate you get a little bit more kind of richness and depth from the Semillon.
And I mean, the thing is that with those two grape varieties, you get gorgeous acidity, both, quite high acid grapes, particularly growing in a cooler location such as the northern part of the Bordeaux region in Pessac. So, I mean, the ageability is actually quite impressive for white wines from your area, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think, I was surprised as well, when I started tasting the older Fieuzals from the 80s. So, even just recently I've had 1991 Fieuzal, which was, absolutely delicious. Obviously the profile of the wine changes as it ages a bit, a little bit, not dissimilar to the way like a champagne would age, so as it gets older, the Sauvignon Blanc, the acidity, the kind of fresh fruit characteristics soften a bit, and you go more towards You get more kind of creamier, buttier, brioche, kind of toasted caramel, that kind of evolution. So 2019, it's still, reasonably young. So we still have that kind of fresh fruit profile on it, I think.
Nice and fresh. And then maybe just a tiny bit of, hint of slightly waxy kind of beeswax coming into the aromas, which is probably the Semillon.
Yeah,
just becoming, just gives it a slightly savoury note, which is really intriguing and kind of very, it's a lovely character. Do you find, are you finding that at all with mine?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, you get that kind of mouth feel from the Semillon.
Yeah,
I think as well, this is, I guess, just for a bit of context. Obviously, we're making Château de Fieuzal white,
yes,
L'Abeilles de Fieuzal white.
yes,
We're making them with slightly different characteristics. Fieuzal white will typically have a higher proportion of Sauvignon Blanc. So this 2019, it's probably moved just off slightly that kind of initial phase where it's more kind of the acidity levels kind of feel a bit higher. The fruit maybe comes across with kind of a little bit more vibrant. Now it's kind of softened and mellowed out a little bit. For white, I guess it's more than 5 years old now at this stage.
yeah. And tell me, anyone, we've suggested shellfish, seafood, to go with this wine, but we'd be really happy to hear if anyone has got any other suggestions, or if they've tried that food matching, it works, or if they've got other ideas around the food matching with the white. But I notice it's quite fashionable now to, well, I think it's lovely, is to decant white wine just to see the colour, and particularly a wine like this, which has got, a lot of layers of aromas and layers of flavour. The decanting possibly just helps open it out. How do you feel about decanting white wines, Daragh?
Yeah, no, it definitely would decant a white wine.
Okay.
I actually opened last night Fieuzal White 2012.
As you do.
From a Magnum, and it was funny, the initial, just the initial taste, it kind of, felt a little bit closed. And then, just putting it into the Magnum before serving just opened it up a little bit more. So I think for any kind of good quality wine, no one's ever going to get fired for putting it into a decanter.
No, and I just think with a white, it's just lovely to see the colours in the decanter as well. It kind of just, particularly with the green bottle, which is important for ultraviolet light protection and so on. I just think when you've got something this colour, it's just beautiful to see it. And it's the depth of the colour and the brilliance of it and the clarity. You just see it nicely in a decanter. And we have a question. What effect is climate change having on the Sauvignon and Semillon in terms of ripening, acidity and alcohol levels? Will the Appellation consider allowing more heat-resistant white varieties for the whites as they have done for the reds? That's from Jonathan.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think probably, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, people would have been, in the chateaus in the region would have been kind of nervous or cautious about, the impact of warmer climate on the white. But I think if we look at our experience from the last kind of 5 or 6 years, we've adapted in terms of how we manage the harvests. So we're, almost really simplistically, we're picking a lot earlier. So, a good example would be 2019 we picked relatively early. 2022, for example, we picked on the 18th of August.
Okay.
And finished on the 21st of August, whereas 2024, we were picking on the 8th or 9th of September. So it's, I guess the vines themselves are quite reactive to conditions, so they are very adaptable plants. And then us as the winemaking team are also, we're not following a kind of a set recipe of how to make the wine. So we're very reactive to the conditions. Obviously, the question is, where will we be in 20 years' time? And certainly, people are conscious of the impact of climate change on different types of grape varieties. So I think Bordeaux, within the context of it being relatively strict on what you're allowed or able to do, I think they're open to, certainly we can see it on the red, they're open to other grape varieties being included. Some of them historic ones that just fallen out of fashion or haven't been used as much over the last kind of 50 years. But it's hard to, for the moment, I would say, our whites are adapting very well. So, and replanting is a huge decision. So, for the moment, we'd be very cautious about changing. We still feel, we can achieve what we want to achieve with the 2 grape varieties we have and where our white is planted. So that also makes a difference.
And in terms of in terms of if it's a particularly hot year, would you make decisions about the way that you manage the leaf canopy, for example? For protection of the grapes and things like that?
Yeah. So like 20 years ago, you just would have automatically, cut back the leaves of the vines during the summer to increase their potential exposure to the sun. Also, even when you were replanting, you would plant it. It would historically have been planted to maximize its exposure to the sun. Whereas, now we would, typically we wouldn't now de-leaf during the summer. And what we've replanted over the last 10 years is we've changed the orientation to kind of reduce the exposure to the sun. So there are things that you do that we were doing that are adapting to the different conditions.
So more north-facing row orientation type of thing, is it?
Yeah, exactly. So we're just trying to, protect the grapes a little bit more. Whereas before, 40 years ago, Bordeaux is, struggled to get to the alcohol levels. So you needed to try and maximize as much the exposure to the sun.
Okay, it's a good question. Thank you for that. At the moment, Jonathan is definitely out in front to win the bottle. So, oh, here we go. We've got another. I must say that we're getting a slightly tangerine citrus aroma now, releasing a bit as the wine warms up. It's becoming a bit more exotic. Just kind of nice tangerine.
Yeah, I think probably it's important to say for these types of white wines, you want it to be chilled, but not too cold.
Absolutely.
I know in the summer the temptation is to have the drink as cold as possible. But
so would you be saying sort of 12 degrees or? Yeah,
I mean it's maybe a little bit kind of colder than that, but not kind of ice cold. It needs to have a certain amount of temperature to release the fruit profile.
Okay, thank you. Right, the next question then we have is how long does it take to pick 76 hectares of vineyard? And do you pick the red and white grapes at different times? That's from David.
Yeah, so absolutely we pick each grape variety separately. And so we will start with the white and we will start with the Sauvignon Blanc. And then we move on to Semillon, and then it'll be Merlot in the red goes first, and then Petit Verdot and Cabernet Sauvignon at the end. I guess we pick everything by hand, and we will pick faster or slower depending on the conditions during the harvest. So given the conditions either of the grapes themselves or the weather over the time frame we're picking, we might want to go faster, or we're happy to go slower. Ultimately, there's a limit to how much you can pick because you have to be able to process in the cellar what you're picking. So you're limited really by kind of how much you can process then once you bring the grapes inside. But typically we will spend kind of 4 or 5 days if we just worked non-stop picking the white, and then the red. It's never all picked in one go, but I think it's roughly kind of two weeks or 14 to 18 days of picking.
And the white crushes faster than the red as well, doesn't it?
So slightly different process in the cellar for the white versus the red.
Better to do the whites.
So for the white, we literally just put the whole bunches into a press and squeeze the juice out. So we don't destem and we don't do any grape selection. What we do is a selection of the juices that come out of the press. So for each grape variety in each plot in Fieuzal, we're going to make 3 white wines. So we make probably kind of about 50 individual white wines that we then will blend together. Whereas for the red, we will destem and do grape selection. So trying to select the grapes that have better maturity profile, or the ones that we want to put into the mix, and then they go into the vats. So slightly different process.
Different process, yeah. Thank you. How do you decide the blend in any given year, and how much can you prepare for that in advance with weather patterns, etc. from Niall?
Yeah, so we really kind of start with a blank piece of paper every year. Obviously, the vineyard is planted with certain proportion, but we really take a view of we try and make each plot of wine as best we can, and then once all the wines are made, we're in a position to start tasting them and tasting different combinations, and it's really just about a very long process of just continually tasting the wines and trying different combinations, and doing it again, and comparing notes and trying to what we think is the best blend. But it's quite at that stage of the process, it's kind of quite intuitive. So it'll be a small group of people that tasting the wines over a period of months to try and get the best outcome. But there's no kind of set formula, and we don't really start with any. It's not like we say, okay, this year we want to have X% Cabernet Sauvignon, or this year we want to have X% Sauvignon Blanc. We make all the wines as best we can, and then we try and make the best Fieuzal possible. And then, that's 55% Sauvignon Blanc. Okay, that's okay.
Fine. And we talked earlier about the opportunity to innovate, because you don't have, your parents didn't come from a wine background, and so they were very open to trying different things, maybe not being so bound by traditions. So you've been quite innovative at the property in terms of winemaking, in terms of your approach. Could you maybe talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so Stefan, the winemaker, his family is originally from Champagne, so he kind of brings a little bit of that kind of history with him. And then he worked for some very well-known estates in Bordeaux, notably Lynne. He was technical director there for a few years. He also ran an estate in Napa Valley for LVMH, and had also done periods in Australia and New Zealand. So he'd seen a lot of different winemaking from across the world, and his philosophy was, there's no one recipe on how to make a great wine. Somebody somewhere in the world is doing something interesting, and there's no reason why we can't learn from that. So at the chateau, we're constantly trying things, whether it's in the barrel room with using different barrel makers, or for the white, a good example would be we actually age the Fieuzal white in oak barrels, but also in acacia barrels, and I think we'd be one of the few people to do that.
What do you think the difference is on the wine between the oak and the acacia?
Yeah, so if you think of like a new oak barrel is one extreme, and then the stainless steel tank is the other. Acacia is kind of somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
So it just allows us to soften and manage the exposure of the wine to wood, basically.
Does it have a wider texture?
I know it's less porous than.
It's less porous, okay.
And it's actually a bigger barrel. So if you
Okay.
see behind me, the barrels there are the classic 225 litre barrel. But for acacia, it's less flexible than oak, so it's hard for the coopers to make it in that size. So they actually usually only make them in 400 litre barrels. So
And less oak effect because there's more liquid in the barrel, basically.
yeah. So we'll typically use, so L'Abeilles, I guess just to go through the process kind of very, very quickly, we make all of the white wine in barrel. So it's fermented in barrel. And then when we do the blend and the tastings for what we want for L'Abeilles and what we want for Fieuzal white, once we've decided on that blend, L'Abeilles white, we move to stainless steel. So we don't age L'Abeilles white in barrel. It's made in barrel, but it's not aged in barrel. Whereas Fieuzal will have 6 to 8 months of aging in barrel.
Okay, thank you. Will we move on to the red, Daragh?
Yes.
So I've got a decanter here because we mentioned a decanter before. So this is still quite useful, 2020, the Château de Fieuzal red. Decant, would you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there can be different reasons or objectives that you're trying to achieve when you're decanting. For younger wines, it's just to help them open up and oxygenate them and just allow them to kind of show their personality. So for younger wines, decanting definitely helps. For older wines, obviously, if they're very old, they can be quite delicate. So decanting is the objective there is maybe to, just before serving, to have it in a decanter so that there's no sediment. Some older bottles can have some sediment. So pouring an older bottle into a decanter just before serving can help them with just leaving the sediment in the bottom of the bottle.
So I'm not going to use a candle, or I don't have a light behind me. It's 2020, so I'm thinking minimal sediment here.
Yeah, there wouldn't be.
I'm just going to decant just for fun online, shall I?
Excellent.
Okay. Just make sure that I've got a good hold of the decanter before I don't do anything. So basically, it's always nice to tip the decanter, and then you tip the bottle, and ideally you would have a candle or a light behind the bottle so that you could see if there was any sediment going into or about to go into the decanter. But I'm trusting that there's very little here on the 2020. And I think we're talking about oxygenation and releasing the fruit aromas and flavors when we're thinking about this age of wine. Daragh, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, 2020. I mean, historically in Bordeaux, you would have had to wait a lot longer before being able to drink or taste a Bordeaux wine. But I think the impact of the changing climate has made it easier to make wines, and I think also there's been huge investment in a lot of wineries. Fieuzal isn't the only vineyard to have rebuilt its cellars over the last 10-15 years, and I think we're trying to make a wine that is, I think, particularly for Pessac-Léognan and for Fieuzal, we're on the left bank, but we're south of Bordeaux city, so we're not the Medoc. We're not the right bank, which is, will be very focused on Merlot. The Medoc, will be predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon. So Fieuzal and Pessac-Léognan, or the Cru Classé de Grave, are, I think, wines that try to, at their best when they find a balance. So that's a balance in terms of, simplistically in terms of the grape variety. So, we're quite balanced between Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, and then a balance in terms of the nice fruit, but good structure, good acidity, not too much tannin, that kind of leaves that kind of dry kind of feeling in your mouth. So a good kind of fruit profile. And then I think the end result of this is that wines that are probably easier to drink or taste young compared to Bordeaux wines from 20-30 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, I think people, I don't know, but do we really want to always wait 20 or 30 years till we have to drink a bottle? So I think there is definitely a good argument for, less leaf coverage, so as the grapes are riper, less extraction, less oak, just so that the wine is more accessible, younger, and not to say
Yeah.
that you can't keep the wines for longer and they develop and you have a beautiful, still have a beautiful bottle of wine. But the 2020, I mean, it's impressively accessible, isn't it, really?
Yeah, so it's what we've done in particular in 2020 is we're doing longer and softer and more gentle extractions than we would have done historically, and then also we're picking the Merlot a little bit sooner, a little bit earlier, so we're gaining a little bit of freshness there. You know, we're not, 20, 30 years ago, you had to really try, in a good year like 2020, you really try and push and gain as much kind of ripeness and maturity as possible. But because the climate change is changing how the grapes are maturing, we don't need to really kind of push for that over maturity or ripeness as much. So we're adding probably a little bit of freshness to the wines. One of the things we're also doing, and I think it shows in the last few years of wines that we've been making, is how we manage the temperature of the grapes post picking. So we're actually doing a cold soak of the grapes for 5 to 8 days before starting the fermentation, and I think that helps with the aromatic profile of the wines. I think it helps with the fruit profile, the acidity, the flavors that we're getting at this early stage.
I mean, incredible fruit purity on the 2020. It's just so bright and vibrant. And yes, there is the black fruits, but you've also got some nice crunchy red fruits as well. It's very fresh. We have another question. Are there any new, and keep the questions coming, we'll keep the prize going to the end of the tasting, so keep the questions coming in. Are there any new techniques or trends in winemaking you're excited to explore?
I mean, I think, every year we're looking at, what can we do better? What's working, or what can we try, or what can we change? So I would say there's, we visit a lot of other vineyards, and we talk with people not just in Bordeaux, but from other wine regions as well. So I think it's just constantly tried to see, whether it's in terms of managing the individual parcels, or what we're doing in terms of extractions, temperature, how we're aging the wine as well. So every year we're looking at what can we add in, what can we do slightly differently. I mean, I wouldn't say there's any one kind of particular thing that saying, oh, we're not doing this, but we want to do this. I say just every year we try and incorporate, what worked well last year, what can we do differently. And also I would say during the year, it's a million little small decisions that you take, and it's also very reactive to the weather conditions. So it's, what worked in 2020 mightn't necessarily be what you need to do in 2024, which was definitely the case. Two very, very different years. Yeah.
Make decisions based on the quality of the fruit in front of you, type of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. But I love visiting other chateaux. I love exchanging kind of views with our neighbors in the Cru Classé de Grave. I love visiting other wine regions and seeing what other people are doing. So I think because there's no one right way to make a great wine. You can always learn something from somebody.
And tell me, what was the last wine region that you went to that you enjoyed outside of Bordeaux?
So a few weeks ago, or in November, I was in La Rioja.
Okay.
So that was very interesting to see the mix of some very, very, very traditional estates and approaches to winemaking, and then some, also some very young people just willing to try new things and make wine in a different way. Because as with Bordeaux, the climate today is very different from what it was 20, 30 years ago. So people. And
who did you visit in Rioja?
Visited some of the classic kind of names. I guess there's a big diversity of kind of very large
Very large.
producers, and then maybe some smaller producers. I particularly really enjoyed visiting Uri. I think they're doing some very interesting things. That's Telmo Rodriguez, very passionate winemaker. So I think what's great about, I haven't always worked in the wine business or in winemaking. So, but what I found and what I really enjoy about it is that at this kind of level of winemaking, everyone is very passionate about what they do, and being able to exchange views and ideas with people that are passionate about what they're doing is really satisfying.
No, absolutely, the passion. I think people who work in our industry are generally very passionate and motivated by product, but it's such a people industry as well. And I think that's one of the nicest things about it is that you're usually dealing with nice people and also a nice product. So whatever region you go to, and I always think that the cross-fertilization of ideas and sharing of ideas is one of the nicest things about the industry. It's not a secretive industry. It's an industry that it raises the boat if everybody's kind of learning, new things at the same time. And yeah. So Niall is asking, I've lost that question. It's gone away. It might come back.
Oh, I think I saw, was that kind of how do we get on with our neighbours?
Right, it's gone away. But anyway, how do you get on with your neighbours?
So yeah, so in theory, we're all selling our own wine, and you might think, well, by definition, and you're all competitors. But what I found actually, certainly in the Cru Classé de Grave, so that's the classification, if you want, of the top wines in Pessac or in the Grave region. And we're 14. There's 14 chateaux that are Cru Classé de Grave, and it's basically 12 families or 12 properties that are run by families. A lot of the families live on the estates, and we do a monthly meeting where we share information. We do promotional events together. We do tastings together. We do we share technical information, and I think the idea is that even within Bordeaux, there is a lot of wine in Bordeaux, and we are representing the best level of winemaking in the Grave region, and we want to promote our wines in our region, and we do that better as a group. And then if you think of the wider world, there's a lot of wine in the world. So if our region can become better known or make better quality wine, ultimately that's going to be better for all of us.
Raising the boat for everyone, really, is well.
Yeah.
So tell me, we've got you online, Daragh. We're delighted to have you, and it's great to be having a chat with you, but you have to now describe the wine aromas and flavors for us, because we don't get the opportunity very often to get the owner.
Yeah, so I mean, when I smell this, I love that kind of the fruit aromas that you get. So they're really kind of quite bright red fruit that I get on the nose. Obviously it's a young wine, so that the color is quite dark, but I think it's kind of vibrant as well. Particularly if we see the edges. There's a nice fruit profile to it. And I get really nice red fruit aromas on the nose, and kind of quite it feels like a little bit of complexity in those aromas, and then on the palate. So what really strikes me is the length and the kind of the uniformity of the taste. So there's quite a long, nice structure to the wine. You know, I can feel the freshness in the wine. You know, even at the end now, you get that kind of feeling of almost kind of fresh, kind of crunchy fruit. You know, the tannins are, there's very good tannin content in the wine, but they're very, very soft. They're very, very well integrated. So I don't get that kind of sticky, kind of dry feeling on my teeth or on the palate, because there's a nice soft finish to the wine. And again, you know, those initial kind of flavors, you know, dark red fruits, or you know, quite noticeable at the beginning, but it's a nice equal, I think, smooth kind of evolution in the palate.
And it's got the tannins are quite silky.
Yeah.
So they're there, but they're very, as you say, integrated, and they're quite velvety tannins, which is sort of silky, velvety texture. And also, I think what is lovely is it's got the red fruit, very fresh on the finish, a nice lift of acidity on the finish. And sometimes think acidity sounds like a bad word, but it's so necessary in wine. It keeps everything balanced and fresh, and it allows the wine to age. It just finishes with delicious freshness and, you know, elegance and fruit. So yeah, very nicely balanced.
Yeah, so I think there's a great balance to this wine,
Yeah.
and I think it's going to age
Very well.
very well. And you know, I'm excited to be trying this, you know, over the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah,
It's going to be really interesting to see how it evolves. And I think, you know, when you know, I realize not everyone is going to be drinking as much Fieuzal as me, so mightn't always get to have that kind of memory of what wines tasted like when they were younger. But you know, I still vividly remember the first Fieuzal white I tasted, which was 1999.
Tell us about it then, your first tasting of Fieuzal white.
Yeah, I just thought it was, you know, extraordinary. You know, I think the whites of this level of white and Grav and of Fieuzal are, you know, not as well known as they could be, or as they should be. And it's that balance and equilibrium and the combination of Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon that is, you know, is really beautiful. And what's been amazing over the last, you know, 25 years is kind of seeing how that 99 has evolved and changed. And that's one of the great things about wine is, you know, each wine in each year has its own kind of story, its own personality, its own history. And you know, I think a wine like Fieuzal Red 2020, you know, we can taste it now, enjoy it now, but you know, we can continue to enjoy it, you know, for a long, long time to come.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in terms of the food matching with this, we said Sunday roast, and the reason that we put that is we wanted to put something quite hearty down there, because when we came with a group of O'Brien's managers to the chateau in the autumn of 2023, I'm thinking, you received us straight from the airport, and we had a lovely cellar tour, a lovely tasting, and then you fed us a really hearty, you know, early dinner that night before we went on our way further into Bordeaux to stay overnight. And I just remember thinking that food was so homely and so honest, and it just worked really, really well with the wines. So, I mean, tell us, chat to us a bit about how you feel you would like your wines to be matched with food. I mean, what's your philosophy there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not kind of too dogmatic about, you know, you can't drink red wine with this, or you can't drink white wine with that. I think it's, you know, people have kind of personal tastes as well, and you know, different countries have different styles of cuisine. You know, probably it's, you know, it probably harder to match this type of red wine or older red wines with, you know, very spicy food is probably a little bit more of a challenge. But otherwise, you know, I'd say the red wine goes, you know, great with you know, any kind of meat dishes, or you know, pasta, or and the white obviously goes, you know, I think particularly well with, you know, with shellfish, with fish, with oysters, with maybe actually surprisingly, you know, I think the white wine, particularly when it's aged a few years, goes particularly well with cheese. So I prefer, you know, sometimes a nice kind of white wine can be a nice contrast or foil to cheeses at the end of the meal, and the red wine, you know, with any kind of roasts or stews or pastas, you know, goes very well. But think it's more important to drink it with friends and family rather than the dish itself.
That's fair enough. I know that in Bordeaux, Conct is becoming quite popular with aged whites, isn't it? Which is quite a combination, the nuttiness of the cheese and the acidity of the white, but also the texture of the white. But you're right, friends and family are the best way to enjoy. So we have another question here. Thanks for that last question, Mary. And Jonathan has asked this one again, which is, a lot has been written in the past year about the challenges to the en primeur system. And it seems that last year's price decrease didn't really solve the underlying issues. How are you and your neighbours approaching it this year?
Yeah, so I guess running a vineyard is really easy. You just have to make great wine and then you just have to sell it. So it's just two little things that you have to do. So en primeur is obviously a very unique system to Bordeaux that's been around for a long time, and maybe for those that aren't too familiar with it, what it involves is roughly there'll be, I think it's around 300 chateaux that use the en primeur system, and what they will be doing is if I take the 2024 vintage, which is we're still just putting the finishing touches on the blend as we speak. We will get the wholesale market in Bordeaux and the wider wine world to come and taste this young vintage still in barrel in April and May of 2025, and we would sell it, and people will get it delivered in 2027. So you're buying the wine, really a couple of years before it's in bottle, and probably realistically at least 5 years, or depending on the wine, maybe 10 years before you would be drinking it. And historically, it's been offered at a price that then, in theory, when the wine then comes onto the market again in bottle, that that price is higher, and so it's an incentive for people to buy it early, whether it's to kind of secure the allocation of the wine they want, or to secure it at a set price. I would say the only thing is, that of the 300 chateaux that use en primeur, not everyone is at the same price point, and not everyone is following the same strategy. And obviously we, in the press, you read a lot about maybe the en primeur system relative to some of the very, very expensive wines, which wouldn't necessarily be something that would be applicable to, say maybe Fieuzal or wines that are at a different price point. But 2024 was definitely a challenging en primeur campaign. I think Bordeaux is a global business. The wine is sold all over the world. China has been, a huge market, and probably I would say domestic consumption has been under pressure in China, which for the wholesale market, then if that was an important part of their sales, they need to try and make up those revenues with other markets. I think also higher interest rates has definitely had an impact. Not to kind of veer too much into financial aspects, but if you're a wholesaler who's got 20, 30, 40, 50 million euros worth of stock, and you've spent the last 10 years with zero interest rates, it's a very different environment if interest rates are suddenly 5-6%, and all of that has had an impact. So yeah, last year was definitely a challenge. I don't think everyone necessarily sold all the wine they wanted to sell, and people's experience of buying maybe some of the more expensive wines haven't seen the price increases they were expecting or hoping for or needed, given the change in the interest rate environment. So I think we're going to see maybe some changes to the system. Maybe en primeur isn't suited to every chateau, or isn't suited to every price point. There has to be a motivation for you to buy en primeur, and that has to be, if I buy it now, it's because I can get it cheaper, versus if I want to buy it in 5 years or 10 years time. Maybe the difference in Bordeaux versus other wine areas then is just the amount of wine that Bordeaux makes. So it's very unusual to not be able to find a particular vintage or a particular wine in Bordeaux. Maybe in the whites where the production is smaller, but you know, for the reds, you can pretty much, you know, pick up the phone and you'll be able to find, you know, Château Latour 2010. You know, somebody somewhere has it, and you'll be able to buy it. And so the rationale for buying en primeur is that you get it at a price and the volume that you want, and that makes sense to purchase it in advance. If you're just going to be paying the same price that you can pay for when the wine comes out onto the market in bottle, then it's not really making any sense. So different chateaus then will have different approaches and different strategies, and some are more successful than others, as I'm sure Lynne, as a wine buyer, would say as well. And you know, us as a chateau, I guess, you know, what we have to try and do is, you know, make obviously the best possible wine we can, and then we have to try and sell it in a way that, you know, people are excited and interested in buying it. Don't know if that answers the question. So
I think it does very thoroughly. It's an interesting, it'll be interesting over the next few years to see what happens. As you say, Daragh, there's probably different approaches for different chateaux depending on what their route to market is. And we're very lucky that we have the direct connection with you, as we do with many of the people that we're working with in Bordeaux. But I know that isn't always the case for all the chateaux, and I think it's good to have the connection between, you know, your customers and the property, you know,
yeah. And I think, you know, another, you know, big distinction is, you know, I think it's really important whether, you know, is your wine viewed as, let's say, an investment wine, or is it a wine being purchased by the distribution or people to ultimately to drink, or are people buying this wine as a store of value and hoping that the value goes up and looking to sell it in 5 years or 10 years. So that's a different, they're two different
things.
Two different things. And the, you know, the price, the en primeur strategy of both is very, very different. And the impact in the secondary market, you know, Bordeaux wines, you know, it's a bit like an old-fashioned stock market. You know, the volume, the wine is there, and you know, you have to try and match the prices. And if you know, there's a different approach to you know, a distribution chain that is buying the wine ultimately to deliver it, you know, to a customer's table to have the bottle opened, versus, you know, somebody that might say, I'm just going to store it in bond in London and Hong Kong for 5 years and sell it and try and make a return. So, you know, they'd be very different. And I think we can see that in some of the wines.
And I know if anyone were at our wine festival this year, you would see Daragh was there pouring his wines, chatting to the customers, our customers at Wine Festival. He also did a masterclass. So you're definitely very in touch with where your wine's going and who's drinking it, and which is, I think, otherwise, as you say, it's just an investment for people, and it's a different conversation. Daragh, listen, thank you very much for joining us. Do we have a winner for the question? Did you guys decide? Let me put it there. Okay, will I pick someone, yeah? Give me a sign. Yeah, okay. I think it is Jonathan with the en primeur question, actually, because I think it's a very interesting question. It's very topical, very current, and I think it's a very unique question, specifically for Bordeaux. And so I think, Jonathan, if you can, one of our team will direct message you to get your details to send out a lovely bottle of the L'Abeilles de Fieuzal 2019. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I hope that you've enjoyed the tasting. Honestly, could chat to you for another hour, Daragh. It's just been fascinating. Thank you for your time. Delighted that a modern day Irish wine goose could join us to chat about the chateau, and we really, really appreciate it, and we hope we'll see you in Dublin soon. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks to the O'Brien's team. There's Mark, there's Chloe, there's Cora Jane, and there's Fiona, all in the background doing all the technical bits and making it all happen. So thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the tasting, hope you enjoyed the wines, and our next in the Irish Wine Geese series is the Château de Fieuzal, which is in February, and those tickets are either on sale or about to be on sale. If you just keep an eye on the website. But thank you. And thank you, Daragh. That was great.
No, thanks. Thanks very much for hosting this. It's always a lovely opportunity to open a bottle of Fieuzal and talk about it and share it with people that have an interest in wine and in the wine that we make. So it was a great pleasure for me to be with you here this evening, and looking forward to seeing you all in Dublin at some stage.
Hopefully in October at the Wine Fest again.
Absolutely.
Not before. Great. Thanks, everyone.